There's a dangerous belief that almost everyone repeats. To dominate, you need to be charismatic, likable, and loved by all. Wrong. Machiavelli already made it clear that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is the only path for those who truly want power. And the uncomfortable truth is this: many of the attitudes you consider virtues are, in practice, revealing your weakness. Flattery you tolerate, silences you don't interpret, microaggressions you ignore, loyalties you assume but never test. Do the ends justify the means? Not when the means are strategic naivete. Better to be feared than loved? Perhaps. But before that, you need to stop being predictable. In this video, you'll understand how certain seemingly innocent attitudes reveal your vulnerability, and how adjusting this can completely change your position in the game. Because dominating begins long before commanding others. It begins by dominating your own circle. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There comes a point in the life of anyone who wants to master their own destiny when they need to bury flattery once and for all. And that's no exaggeration. Flattery is sweet, it's comfortable, it massages the ego, but it corrodes lucidity. Machiavelli already warned with that elegant coldness of someone who understood true human nature that the wise prince needed to carefully choose who was allowed to tell the truth. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The right person doesn't call you a genius all the time, they call you responsible. They don't feed your vanity, they sharpen your virtue. Because in the game between virtù and fortuna, those who only hear applause become slaves to their own reflection. Better to be feared than loved, perhaps. But before that, better to be confronted than deceived. Does the end justify the means? Only when the means are not a comfortable lie. Flatterers offer you the appearance of virtue. True allies deliver growth, and there's a brutal difference between the two. An experienced mentor observes a curious pattern. The greater someone's potential, the more people appear to tell that person what they want to hear. And therein lies the danger. Because decisions based on real human nature require constant adaptability. A strategic friend, a loyal partner, one of those who function as their own loyal armies, will say, "You made a mistake here," and they will say it, looking you in the eye. Not to humiliate you, but to prevent you from being hated outside for arrogance inside. The calculated use of force begins within one's own mind. Want a practical example? If you lead a team, ask for real anonymous feedback. If you write screenplays, show them to someone who isn't afraid to disagree. If you invest, talk to someone who understands risk, not just someone who confirms your thesis. Read The Prince by Machiavelli, and then compare it with The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. One speaks of the harshness of reality, the other of the power of the mind. The two complement each other when you abandon flattery. The death of flattery doesn't mean becoming cold or cynical. It means creating a circle where truth is more valuable than applause. And that takes courage, you know? Because it hurts to hear that you're still mediocre at something you think you're excellent at. But that's where the transformation begins. The right person doesn't protect you from discomfort. They protect you from stagnation. They understand that avoiding being hated isn't about pleasing everyone, but about acting with strategic integrity. And there's something almost silent about it. When someone challenges you respectfully, there's a constructive tension in the air. It's not destructive conflict, it's refinement. It's politics guided by reality, not by romantic ideals of superficial friendship. And curiously, when flattery dies, something deeper emerges. Something that goes beyond constant words. Something that weighs in the silence and says much more than entire speeches. Few people are prepared to deal with your light, but almost no one is ready to deal with your shadow. And here's a truth that almost no one tells you. Whoever wants to master their own path needs to accept that they carry within themselves contradictory impulses, old traumas, momentary envies, silent fears. Machiavelli understood this when he spoke of decisions based on real human nature. He didn't believe in idealized purity. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The right person doesn't run away when they see your imperfection. They don't turn you into a villain for having weaknesses. They know that virtue and fortune go hand in hand, and that sometimes fortune tests you by exposing your most vulnerable points. Whoever endures their shadow doesn't demand an appearance of virtue all the time. And that, my friend, is rare, because it's much easier to love a mask than to accept a whole human being. There's a stark difference between someone who tolerates you and someone who understands you. To tolerate is pretending not to see your flaws. To understand is to see them and still choose to stay. And look, this doesn't mean allowing abuse or irresponsibility. Calculated use of force also applies in relationships. A mature person will say, "I understand your trauma, but you need to work on it." It's not blind protection. It's strategic loyalty. If you carry insecurity from past rejections, for example, the right person won't use that against you in an argument. They won't expose your weakness as a weapon. On the contrary, they will encourage you to read about depth psychology, perhaps delve into Carl Jung, perhaps go to therapy, perhaps practice daily journaling to understand your patterns. Your own loyal armies don't attack their own general. They strengthen the structure, and enduring your shadow is strengthening your inner structure. Now, be careful. Enduring your shadow doesn't mean romanticizing your mistakes. Those who are truly by your side will confront destructive behaviors, because avoiding being hated doesn't mean passively accepting everything. It means acting with just firmness. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means are self-sabotage. A strong relationship understands that constant adaptability requires continuous growth. You change, they change, and both choose to remain aware of their own shadows. When someone accepts your bad days, your strange silences, your insecurities confessed at 3 in the morning, there's something there that goes beyond the surface. And curiously, when two people can endure each other's shadows, a connection emerges that doesn't depend on words all the time. A presence arises, a kind of silence that weighs heavily but doesn't hurt. And that's exactly where the next level begins to reveal itself. There is a type of silence that is awkward, and there is a silence that strengthens. Those who understand Machiavelli know that real power is rarely noisy. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The right person doesn't need to fill every second with empty words to prove connection. On the contrary, when there is sufficient virtù between two individuals, silence becomes comfortable. And that is rare. Very rare, because most relationships thrive on the constant need for validation, incessant conversations, messages every minute, confirmations all the time. But decisions based on real human nature show that those who need to talk too much are usually trying to hide insecurity. Heavy silence, the kind that doesn't bother, reveals emotional maturity. Better to be feared than loved, perhaps. But before that, better to be respected in silence than idolized in noise. Consider a simple example. Two people sitting side by side, each focused on their own work, with no need for distraction. There is no tension, there is no pressure, there is presence. This is a loyal and personal army in the form of emotional connection. There is no pretense of performative virtue. There is no rehearsed speech. There is authenticity. And see how this connects to the calculated use of force. Knowing when to speak is as important as knowing when to be silent. How many arguments could be avoided if someone had chosen strategic silence instead of impulsive words? Constant adaptability also means knowing how to gauge the weight of one's own voice. Want to apply this? Try, in the next important conversation, listening more than speaking. Take pauses. Observe body language. Read books like Body Language by Alan Pease, or even reread The Prince, noting how Machiavelli values perception. Silence teaches more than fiery speeches. Heavy silence is, in fact, an invisible proof of inner security. When someone endures their shadow and still manages to share silence without discomfort, there is a silent strength there. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means is excessive, talking used as an emotional escape. Avoiding being hated also involves knowing that wrong words leave marks that are difficult to erase. The right silence builds mystery, respect, and depth. It creates a field where energy is not drained, but preserved. And here's something curious. When two people manage to share silence without tension, they also begin to perceive how energy flows or is depleted in each other's presence. Because not all silence is comfortable. Some are heavy in a way that reveals exhaustion. And when you start to feel this difference, something begins to change in the way you measure who truly strengthens you. There's a simple and brutally honest criterion for measuring any relationship. How do you feel after leaving it? Stronger or more exhausted? Most people ignore this indicator because they're trapped by the appearance of virtue. But he's a good person. But she's always been my friend. And so they continue tolerating constant emotional drain. Machiavelli would never analyze relationships by their facade. He would evaluate them by their results. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. If every interaction leaves you mentally exhausted, something is out of alignment. Decisions based on real human nature require strategic coldness. Energy is a resource, and a poorly managed resource weakens your power. Better to be feared than loved, perhaps. But above all, it's better to preserve your energy than to waste it trying to please those who feed off your exhaustion. There are people who act like true emotional vampires, not out of conscious malice, but out of chronic neediness. They complain all the time, compete covertly, and make subtle micro-criticisms. Calculated use of force here means setting limits without guilt. Your own loyal armies don't sabotage their own commander. If someone only shows up when they need something, but never strengthens you, observe. Constant adaptability isn't about tolerating everything. It's about adjusting the circle as you grow. Want a practical exercise? For 1 week, write down how you feel after talking to each close person. Energized, inspired, or irritated and drained. This simple habit reveals invisible patterns. Also, read Essentialism by Greg McKeown and reflect on how to eliminate what doesn't add value, including in relationships. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means is your own emotional exhaustion. Strategic relationships strengthen you. They foster growth, offer constructive criticism, and still leave you with a sense of expansion. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean erasing yourself to keep everyone comfortable. It means acting with maturity. When someone respects your boundaries, celebrates your victories, and doesn't silently compete, you feel lightness. Energy flows. There's exchange. There's no hidden weight. And look, this connects to the silence we talked about before. Comfortable silence preserves energy. Tense silence consumes it. Virtù and Fortuna come into play here because Fortuna can put the right or wrong people in your path, but your Virtù decides who stays. And when you start to notice who doesn't drain your energy, you naturally begin to observe another, even deeper criterion: who stays by your side when the wind turns against you. It's easy to stand by someone when everything is going well. The real challenge is remaining when fortune decides to test the structure. Machiavelli spoke of having one's own loyal armies because he understood that fragile alliances crumble in the first conflict, and relationships are no different. Politics should be guided by reality, not ideals. Strategic loyalty is neither blind nor emotionally childish. It is conscious. It is the deliberate choice to remain when the situation becomes unpopular. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps. But above all, is it better to be respected by those who remain steadfast than surrounded by fleeting applause? The right person doesn't disappear when you make a public mistake. They don't distance themselves to preserve their image. They talk, guide, and adjust course. The calculated use of force also involves defending those you have chosen as allies. Now pay attention to this. Strategic loyalty doesn't mean agreeing with everything. On the contrary, it means protecting your reputation, including from yourself. Decisions based on real human nature show that everyone makes mistakes under pressure. A loyal person will tell you in private what you need to hear, and in public will firmly stand by their position. That's maturity. That's virtù. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means is abandoning someone to appear superior. Avoiding being hated sometimes requires courage to stand by an unpopular position. Want a practical example? If you lead a project and a member of your team fails, correct them in private and protect them in public. If you're in a relationship, resolve conflicts internally. Don't expose vulnerabilities to third parties. Read the 48 Laws of Power, but read it with a critical filter. Power without loyalty becomes paranoia. True loyalty is silent, constant, and strategic. It's not displayed on social media. It's not performative. It doesn't depend on an audience. The appearance of virtue is noisy. Real loyalty is discreet. Constant adaptability means adjusting expectations but not abandoning principles. And when someone stays by your side during difficult times, even when it doesn't bring immediate benefit, something profound is consolidated. Virtù and Fortuna come into play again. Fortuna tests, virtù sustains. And curiously, when you find someone like that, you realize that this presence not only protects you, it also challenges you. Because true loyalty doesn't accept comfortable mediocrity, it pushes you upward. And that's where the next layer of this dynamic begins. There's a huge difference between those who accept their current version and those who challenge their next version. Most people prefer to keep everything comfortable because growth is unsettling, exposes weaknesses, and demands constant adaptability. But those who understand Machiavelli know politics guided by reality, not ideals. If you want to master your own path, you need people who fearlessly challenge your mediocrity. Better to be feared than loved? Perhaps. But in this context, it's better to be challenged than complacent. The right person isn't satisfied with your "it's already good enough." They see your virtue even before you realize it. They understand that virtue and fortune meet when you decide to act, not when you expect applause. And that hurts a little because it affects the ego, but it hurts like a gym workout. It hurts to strengthen. Observe how this works in practice. Imagine you've been saying for years that you want to start a business, but you never do. The average person will say, "Oh, take your time." The strategic person will ask, "What's the plan? What's the deadline?" Decisions based on real human nature show that without positive pressure, most people procrastinate indefinitely. Calculated use of force here means encouraging concrete action. Want to grow financially? Start by studying financial education with books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or even revisiting Machiavelli through the lens of personal strategy. Want to improve your communication? Take practical courses, record videos, put yourself out there. Your own loyal armies don't let the general sleep while the war is going on. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means are a comfortable excuse. Challenging your ambition isn't about competing with yourself. It's about believing in your potential to the point of not accepting your limited version. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean softening important truths. It means saying what needs to be said with maturity. The appearance of virtue is praising your minimal effort. True virtue is demanding excellence. And see how this connects to energy. Those who challenge your ambition usually also celebrate your achievements genuinely. There's no petty envy, no disguised sarcasm. There's true pride. Because when two people grow together, the growth of one doesn't threaten the other. And it's precisely here that we begin to perceive an even more subtle sign, something almost invisible, that reveals whether the celebration is genuine or masked. Microaggressions are small, subtle, almost invisible, and precisely for that reason, dangerous. They aren't direct attacks. They're comments with slight sarcasm, innocent jokes, compliments that come with a dig. Machiavelli would never ignore this kind of signal. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, because decisions based on real human nature require a keen reading of behavior. The right person celebrates their victory without turning it into a silent competition. There's no "finally you did it, huh?" There's no crooked smile when you succeed. The appearance of virtue is applauding in public and diminishing in private. Virtue is celebrating without resentment. Better to be feared than loved, perhaps, but even better is to be surrounded by those who don't feel threatened when you evolve. Pay attention to this in practice. You announce an achievement, a promotion, a raise, a new project, and observe the reactions. Some quickly change the subject, others make an immediate comparison to their own lives. Calculated use of force here is not aggressive confrontation, but strategic awareness. Constant adaptability means adjusting your circle when patterns repeat themselves. Your own loyal armies don't sabotage internal morale with subtle irony. Does the end justify the means? Not when the means is tolerating disrespect disguised as humor. Want a simple exercise? After sharing an achievement, observe 3 things: tone of voice, facial expression, and the content of the response. The absence of microaggressions is noticeable when the other person's joy seems as genuine as yours. This is not naivete. It's a strategic reading of real human nature. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting small provocations to keep the peace. On the contrary, it means setting a standard. Those who respect you don't need to diminish you to feel great. And here's something powerful. When someone celebrates your victories without disguised envy, an environment of mutual growth is created. Virtù and fortuna align when both prosper without resentment. The absence of microaggressions reveals inner security, because those who are secure don't need to compete silently. And when you begin to realize this, a new question arises. If there is genuine celebration, if energy is preserved, if there is strategic loyalty, is the exchange also balanced? Or have you been giving more than you receive? Every healthy relationship obeys a silent law: balance. It's not cold mathematics, but it's not constant imbalance either. Machiavelli understood something essential about alliances. Relationships last when there is clear mutual benefit. Politics guided by reality, not by romantic ideals. The law of reciprocity doesn't need to be demanded. It manifests itself naturally. You support. The other person supports. You listen. The other person listens. There's no obsessive emotional accounting, but there's also no unilateral exploitation. Decisions based on real human nature show that when only one side invests, the bond weakens. Better to be feared than loved, perhaps. But above all, better to be respected in a fair exchange than loved in an unbalanced relationship. Virtue here is emotional maturity. Fortuna is the rare encounter with someone who also understands this. Reciprocity isn't about doing exactly the same thing. It's about offering within one's own capacity with equivalent intention. A loyal and dedicated armies don't send soldiers while the general hides. Calculated use of force means knowing when to adjust effort. If you're always initiating conversations, resolving conflicts, proposing meetings, something is out of sync. Constant adaptability means recognizing this early before resentment grows. Want to apply this practically? For a month, observe who spontaneously takes initiative, who asks how you are without needing anything in return, who invests time, not just words. Does the end justify the means, not when the means involve self-annihilation while waiting for future recognition? The appearance of virtue is saying, I do it because I'm good. True virtue is balancing presence and boundaries. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting imbalance to appear generous. It means acting with strategic awareness. The law of reciprocity is the ultimate invisible test of any strong relationship. When there is balance, you feel lightness. There is no accumulated emotional weight. There is no implicit demand. There is flow. Virtù and fortuna come into play again. Fortuna can bring people closer, but it is your virtù that maintains the balance. And when all the previous elements are present, absence of flattery, acceptance of the shadow, comfortable silence, preserved energy, strategic loyalty, provocation of ambition, absence of microaggressions, reciprocity arises almost as a natural consequence. And then you begin to perceive something greater, that dominating is not about controlling people. It's about knowing how to identify who can truly walk beside you without weakening your structure. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that dominance isn't about instilling gratuitous fear, nor about collecting empty applause. It's about discernment. It's about understanding, as Machiavelli taught, that politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands constant clarity. Now I ask you, who is in your circle today out of flattery and not out of truth? Who celebrates you genuinely and who merely maintains an appearance of virtue? Who truly functions as their own loyal armies when fortune turns against you? Have you been enduring microaggressions to avoid being hated? Have you been confusing uncomfortable silence with deep connection? Have you been calling what is, in practice, convenience, loyalty? Decisions based on real human nature begin when you stop romanticizing relationships and start observing them strategically. Is it better to be feared than loved? Perhaps, but it is even better to be respected by those who remain strong by your side. Virtù and fortuna do not walk with naivete. They walk with awareness. So tell me, are you surrounded by people who ignite your ambition, or by people who are comfortable with your mediocrity? Are you living by a balanced law of reciprocity, or are you investing energy where there is no return? Does the end justify the means? Only if the means lead to growth, maturity, and strategy. Now the decision is yours. Will you continue playing on autopilot, or will you adjust your circle with the calculated use of force and constant adaptability? If this content opened your eyes, if it made you see something that previously went unnoticed, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning how to apply these Machiavellian principles in practice, without naivete, without romanticizing, but with real strategy.